very much. Jose Luis and Adam and Vanessa also a stand-in. I asked her maybe about an hour ago. So again, we're going to wing this, but I think that it also speaks to the volume of the work that has been going on in different states that we can speak to, inform you, and then also raise the question as to where do we go from here. So, as you've heard throughout the day, since 2006, there has been recession in Puerto Rico. There's been lots of mobility. There's been the aquí and the allá shuttle, right? Because we really live in two places, whether physically or in our minds. And so there has been also a lot of work going on stateside in terms of working with those, regardless of who we are or where we plan on living throughout our lives. And so today we have these amazing three individuals that will give you three different perspectives from where they sit, from within their positions, and also what they see as to what is it that we can do, because this is really about solidarity and also about engagement. And I could tell you that it is a struggle. And last night I had the privilege of joining the Springfield Puerto Rican Parade Gala, and some of our beautiful guests who had come from Puerto Rico and I had a drive back to the hotel, and we spoke about engagement. And engagement has been difficult, not only here, but also in Puerto Rico for various reasons and sometimes different reasons. But I think that it's a responsibility that each of us have as we opened up this program this morning about what is it that we can do as individuals within our institutions. We thank Commissioner Santiago for the information that he has shared with us, because institutions also play a major role in which way is it that our communities will fare. And so what we would like to share with you, our panelists will share with you, is the kind of work that they have been doing to be able, in solidarity con Puerto Rico, and then the engagement from where they are at. So I'm going to share this microphone with Jose Luis. It's great to see you here again. We were in New York a couple of weeks ago, and I said, you have to come to Massachusetts. And so, again, he's been here. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for the invitation. It's really a pleasure. It's my first time here. So it's truly beautiful. I was saying the leaves and the trees and everything. Holyoke, it's really a wonderful place, and it's great to know that we have such a great representation, such a great community. I come from a very heavy community engagement background, and I have some fellows like Jimmy Torres, who I work very closely with. And so just wanted to say that I want to give a big applause and shout out to those leaders, the youth over there, who have been making all of this possible. So I'm the director and founder of the National Puerto Rican Student Coalition. Basically, what we've been doing is identify Puerto Rican student associations within the different universities across the nation. To give you an example, here in the state of Massachusetts, we actually have a particular alliance or partnership with actually two PRSAs, that's how we call it, at Harvard. We actually have an association with APR, which is the student organization at MIT, at BU, also at Yale. So we actually have a lot of students who are actively engaged with Puerto Rican affairs and that want to definitely make a difference within that sector. And they, unfortunately, they couldn't make it here today, but they're heavily interested in engaging with Enlace and many other organizations that we're networking with here to make an impact on that youth sector, because we understand that there's an importance in how we are inspiring the future, and we definitely want to lead the future and work with our pillars and peers who are leading the way, and we want to definitely follow. So thank you all, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Now, City Councilor Adam Gomez, who I have had the distinct pleasure of being able to just see the passion and he works endlessly, and during Hurricane Maria's tragedy, Adam was just a real mover and shaker and in solidarity with Puerto Rico. And so, one, we would like to ask him from basically a grassroots level, and then also in terms of a city councilor, you are one of very few. And what does that mean for you and the community, and being able to get the votes that you need both on city council when you bring issues to them regarding our community, our issues.
No, I'm not really shy with the mic, but I just want to say I'm thankful and humbled to be included as per usual when it comes to Centro and with Betty, what you do for Holyoke. My name is Adam Gomez. I'm a Springfield City Councilor. I represent a district a Puerto Rican majority district in Massachusetts. Ourselves and a district in Holyoke kind of flip-flop on which one's the poorest, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. We're still Boricua. Moving forward, I come from an activist background. My mother and my father have instilled every single value, not to ever forget, not one time, that I'm Puerto Rican first. And my father was involved with founding the Puerto Rican Parade. My mother was doing the Puerto Rican, she was the executive director at the PRCC for a little while. And I was always like the volunteer. I worked for BRAFA as a voter registration officer when we had an office in Springfield at a very young age when I was at Westwood State University at the time. And moreover, I got involved with, on a grassroots level, just what were the issues and what was going on within my community, because it affected me, right? I was born and raised in this neighborhood, so if it was parks or cultural awareness and dealing with kind of bigotry at the same time at all levels, some people tend to forget that, we are African at best. It's in our bloodline. But moving forward, I got involved with a social justice, I like to call them fraternity, when I was at school. It was like kind of a culture shock, because I grew up in a community really that you still hear roosters, like if you were in Puerto Rico. So when people say, oh no, Puerto Rico, I'm like, what are you talking about? I hear roosters in the morning, like everybody else. So essentially, when I went to school, it was a culture shock. It was like a fistful of us, and I got involved with La Fe, and then from there got involved with my fraternity, and I got involved with reading and understanding and educating myself about the history of Puerto Rico on just regular history level, and then from there on a political level. I came home. There was a lot of things that I seen in my community I wasn't appreciated. I wasn't appreciated, but I did not appreciate. And little by little, I got involved with a brother of mine on a more social justice aspect. His name was Rivera. Rest in peace. And from there, he believed that it was time for young people to get involved with what was going on. And I might look a little bit older than I am because I've been through some, you know what I'm saying? I've been through some itch, right? So outside of it, about 5 years ago, 2015, we ran a grassroots campaign, and we ended up winning like 53% of the vote, 80-day campaign at that, with our back against the wall. A lot of folks sometimes didn't believe and don't put all their chips on young people, right? And to me, our young people is essentially everything we got. But I can always understand the wisdom, and that song always rings bells in my mind. I think it's La hojas blancas siguen cayendo, right? Yes. So I've always learned a lot from everybody that I've worked and engaged in my community, which could have been a nonprofit. It could have been somebody that had some type of wisdom that educated me during the life. Because if you know who I am and you're in this room, you know that my story is no Christmas. But essentially, it's the same as the Puerto Rican history, right? It was a hard fought. It's hard fought. So essentially, when we won and I got involved, I made sure that every single issue that I did put forth was part of the Puerto Rican agenda. I already knew a little bit about Betty and the history because she's worked hand in hand with Dad a lot. But outside of it, I got to meet her in New York, and I actually didn't have a ride back, and I got to ride back. So, you know, sometimes those sacrifices, right? And essentially those sacrifices, when you don't know how you're gonna get home, but you need to be in the building, you need to be in the room, because sometimes it is presente, right? And that's when I first met, on a grassroots level, Edwin Melendez. I didn't know who he was, and in the state, he was already working with great people like Otoniel and Vanessa, and they reached out to us grassroots folks like Calvin Feliciano, Jafet Robles at the time when he was alive, myself, and we met in a small little room of space in Worcester, and we created Alianza for Puerto Rico. And without a doubt, a person that, you know, was counted out in a second, it mattered because I was presente. And then from there, I couldn't even believe that I found myself in a short span inside of, and at this time, it was before Hurricane Maria. I wasn't even a councilor at the time. And I had became elected, and we were fighting against the fiscal crisis and then the promesa. And then all of a sudden being bombarded with Hurricane Maria. And then essentially when I became a councilor, we worked in solidarity with Josie Valentin, spearheaded by our state representative, Carlos Gonzalez, and our partners like Jose Tesaro and also Aaron Vega from here in Holyoke, and also school committee woman that she was here, Maria Perez, and then the other nonprofits like Enlace from the Familia and New York Citizens Council, Gandara, and the community. We created kind of this organic group that was called Western Mass for Puerto Rico. Not that we weren't in solidarity with the rest of the state of Massachusetts, but sometimes there's not that there's a division that exists, but sometimes Boston is Boston and Western Mass is really like the West. So welcome to the Wild West, right? So, and some folks don't even realize how big the Puerto Rican community in this region actually is. When I became a council member, I understood that even in my city, 70,000 Puerto Ricans live there, and I represent about 18,000. It just made me realize how much spread out, how much we've grown, because my family was a family that first came to Springfield with that ideal of the American dream, working on the tobacco fields. And if you don't know anything about West Mass, the first job you probably ever had or your family had was on that tobacco field. And you know, the stories and moving forward, that's why I consistently have to be presente, regardless if I'm a city council member and I'm weighing different things, if it's a resolution, or if it's something that I have to work with Carlos Gonzalez or push something on the state level, or the weekend that you guys were in New York, I was out in Washington, D.C. with Hispanic Federation and with Powerful Puerto Rico and Puerto Rican Agenda out of Chicago, lobbying 66 congressional meetings, or more like 67. They were organically coming, lobbying a bill from powerful Latinas in the House like Lydia Velasquez, and also our own, you know, I take pride. She's like kind of our other Puerto Rican in my heart, because she's always been present for us, and that's Elizabeth Warren on the Senate side. So essentially, you know, being present is so important, not only on a grassroots level on the ground, making sure that if it's a small little event, it could be, you know, picking up the trash at the park, but essentially being in the halls in the chamber and making sure that you're putting your first Puerto Rican foot first, right? Then after that, being in the State House and making sure we're present there too, but also on the federal level, and then engaging and networking with the folks that came here to understand whatever's going on in your community is going on in our community. So essentially all this information that Centro has for us in the last 6 years that I've been a part of, it's unexplainable. Some people say that when you do what you love, you really don't really notice the work that you're really doing. And you know, I'm humbled by the words, but essentially, like any politician, I'm going to be quiet because I'll keep on going. So I appreciate it. If there's any more questions after, I can do that after. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Our next panelist is Vanessa Pabon. And when I look at Vanessa, I always think of her as the youth and millennium champion. Yeah. If you start a conversation with Vanessa, no matter what you thought you were going to start with, it's going to end up about the youth. the youth in the community, those that did not think that had a voice. Vanessa somehow challenges them and also nurtures them so that they could find that voice. And they're able to bring it out in such amazing, with talent and passion. And so when I see Vanessa, that's what I see, and I love you for that. Vanessa has worked hard there's no hour and no day that she's not working with the youth, and so I'm gonna give her the opportunity to be able to speak about what she has been able to do, because at the end of the day, we've heard it over and over again, and with Commissioner Santiago's presentation, it only speaks even louder, at least to me, I hope to you, is that it is about the youth and the millennium that we have to stand strong behind. So Vanessa, thank you. Last minute, I appreciate you. Please speak to us about your work and what drives that passion of yours.
So first of all, thank you for encouraging me to sit on this panel. Many of you guys know that I'm very vocal, but I don't like to be in these kind of settings. So I always try to assign a young person to it, in which I thought I did at one of the panels if you missed it. But thank you for thinking of me. First of all, I want to say that I grew up in the island of the north end of Springfield. And while I didn't grow up in the island of Puerto Rico, I got to visit there for years. And my mother made sure that I understood the roots, our family roots. And so it's interesting because, believe it or not, I started my career working with young people when I was a youth, I would say. Adam was one of my kids that I helped mentor and then provided a job. So it's actually kind of exciting when I go to these events and I see a lot of the young people that I've worked with. And I see the seats that are the tables that they're at and the chairs that they bring to those tables. Is exciting for me because I feel that there was once a time that somebody gave me an opportunity and someone believed in me and trusted me. And so one of the things that I've always made sure to do with having a very strong, independent mother that was a community organizer for years was to remind me that you don't do things alone. And that sometimes you have to sacrifice a lot of things, and sometimes you have to be the voice for other people, even if you don't benefit from it. So I'm glad that my mother instilled that in me. And over the years, I started my career as a director of a youth center in the North End in my early 20s. I had no clue what I was doing. But one thing I was very clear about was being able to engage the families. And at that time, if you don't know the history of the North End, there was a lot of gang violence. And we had a lot of police officers in the community that were not engaging with the young people. It's really going to start rioting. So one of the things I did at a very young age was create a relationship with the police officers to say, if you want to come into this community, if you want to come into this space, you have to engage with these young people in a positive way. So I kind of forced them to do something different. And I told them, if you're not going to come here in a positive light, then you're not welcome. And so I think that taught me also the power of your voice, the power of stories. And I was able to move in a position where that I took a risk and I left the North End Youth Center to do some digital storytelling work in the North End. And I took a risk, and I say that because I left a full-time job with benefits to do a part-time job there was no commitment of continuing the work. But in my heart, I believe that what we were not doing was we were capturing the stories of individuals and we were making a lot of assumptions. So one of the things that I was able to do is, as one of the first digital storytelling centers nationally known, I was able to be one of the founders of Telling Our Legacies Digitally. And through that work, we were able to show residents of the community how to produce their own stories, short video narratives. Mind you, I didn't have a background on this. I self-taught. I had my own business at the time, but I was passionate about it. And it was a community that I lived in, I grew up in, and then eventually bought a house in where I currently live in. And through that work, one thing that I realized and where it got me today was that while we were using storytelling as a framework for organizing, for outreach, and eliminating the assumptions of what the needs of the community were, I realized that where I was sitting at that moment wasn't the right place. So I had, many of you guys know Dr. Scabbard in the North End. And he was one of my mentors, and he advocated and said, well, where do you see yourself? And I said, well, I don't know. Where's the spaces that I should sit? And he said, well, what about this place, this place, this place? And he brought up WGBY, our public television station. And I had never really thought about WGBY because I only watched it growing up, and many of you on Sesame Street. And while we drove by it on the highway all the time, and I remember being very little and saying, oh, Big Bird lives there, I never, as a young adult, really understood the power of the location or the medium and what they did and their purpose. And for many of you guys, when you watch pledge shows, you change the channel because you're just not grown up to give that way. But when I did my own little research and found out really about the space and what they were not doing, I realized it was my opportunity to go and have a conversation with, at the time, the general manager, Russ Piotr, and tell them about the work we were doing in the community. So I say this because sometimes we get discouraged about where we don't know where our future is going to be. We sometimes are scared to ask for a space at the table. But I think when you identify a gap or a need that represents your community, you have to just be willing to go into those spaces, knock on the door, and kindly introduce to them what they don't currently have, or the missed opportunities. And I was able to do that. So thankfully, I was able to work very closely with Russ. We started a program, which was the Latino Youth Media Institute. And at that time, I remember telling Russ, you're not just hiring me, you're now engaging the community. And I was grateful to hire different people, different positions, and through the years, I had a selfish interest, but understanding that there was a need in the community. And I aligned myself with a lot of like-minded individuals. And so we have some Latino advisory board members in the room. Veronica, who's now the host of our show Presencia, was one of my first staff members who originally, if we didn't come together, probably would have ended up being our competition, right? And so I think sometimes you have to have conversations with even our own peers and people that are doing the same type of work to figure out how we strategize and work together and not against each other. So I learned that along the way. The other thing I will say that over the years, especially with the solidarity of Puerto Rico, after Hurricane Maria hit, we were creating programming already for Presencia. And if you guys are not familiar with it, it's one of the only bilingual shows in the area and in the PBS network. So we're excited about that. It's groundbreaking work, but it's very difficult. And it's very hard. But with the support of everyone in this room and our team, we've come a long way. And I will say that in 2018, when the hurricane hit, we were in the middle of production of our season, and it personally affected me and my family. And so I had to go back and, as one of the executive producers say, what do we do? How do we respond? How do we turn around a show? How would we put together something? And I will say that within a week, we put something on air that had both English and Spanish captioning, and we brought the community together and produced a show, which was really impressive for our station. And I think that over the years, we've been able to do that kind of work. The following year, we worked with a group of students from Puerto Rico that came here and instead of just capturing their stories, we taught them how to produce their own stories. And that was really a great emotional summer workshop where those students got paid. We then followed up after that and produced another show called 1 Year Later, Hurricane Maria 1 Year Later. And, you know, all of these programs that we produce, we do it with intention to make sure that they're in both English and Spanish. And that it's representative not just the Latino community, not just the Puerto Rican community, but for everyone else. We encourage language, and I think that there's a disconnection of when we create bilingual programming that is only for the Latino community, and that is not true. So, as Adam, I can probably talk all day about it, especially because I'm very passionate about the work that we do and working with young people. But I'm grateful for this opportunity. I'm grateful for the young people. And I say that they're not the next generation, they're our current leaders. And I think I will say that what I would encourage everyone in this room, regardless of what position you're in and regardless of how old you are, please create an opportunity for them, open doors for others, and help guide them. It's okay if they take your job one day.
This plenary is around solidarity and engagement. A question has been brought up, and you can take it in whichever order, it's your choice. And it's the question is, based on the work you individually carry out in solidarity with Puerto Rico, what are the gaps you identify in your work that need to be filled in?
Well, I wanted to introduce myself a little bit briefly and the work we're doing, but I'm so amazed by the work they're doing, and I realized that it didn't really went too much in depth as expected into the work we do. So first, we want to be very grateful with Centro. Centro has been key for all the work we do. We basically have a model of, okay, so we've seen this gap between conversations with Dr. Menendez, Torres, among many other leaders, peer leaders of our national community, and they've all said the same. You know, there's a gap of leadership, presence of the youth, particularly the Puerto Rican youth here in the mainland and also in Puerto Rico. So how do we actually engage this type of high-level conversation, high-level leadership with the youth? And so that was kind of the key challenge we face at the moment. I myself come from a local engagement. I started the Puerto Rican Student Association at the University of Central Florida in Orlando, Florida, thanks to the mentorship of people like Jimmy Torres and their great support. What we did is at the moment we faced the most influx from displaced students from Puerto Rico to Orlando, to UCF. And so we were faced with the challenge of offering in-state tuition. That was a reduced rate for only one semester, and we faced the similar circumstances as here in the Holyoke Community College. How are we actually going to proactively deal with this challenge? And so we knew we had to empower ourselves, because it was not going to come from the top bottom, but it was going to come from the bottom top. So we, the students, took charge. We actually aligned with our community leaders, with our leaders within our institution, and we brought it forward, and we got an extension of in-state tuition, which is a difference of $9,000 per semester. It's quite a reduction. If you look at it in an aggregate of almost 500 students, it's almost like 50 million, and that was thanks to the initiative of the students and how we organized and actually took that into the leadership. Their consideration wasn't easy. They told us that, you know, they were considering for them to go back to Puerto Rico, and we know that wasn't an option. As the commissioner said, if they're here to stay. You know, they left so much behind and so many challenges. And so the question was, how can we take this into a state perspective, not just global, and also a national perspective? We were actually able to collaborate with Camila Vasquez, who's here from the FIU, Florida International University, and they actually took the same initiative in Miami and extended the in-state tuition. And that was all thanks to the student and their own empowerment. So we built this coalition, the concept of empowering students, empowering the young Puerto Rican leaders who maybe had a desire of being empowered but didn't know how. And so that was a gap we definitely identified, and thanks to all the help and support of Centro, Betty, Jimmy Torres, many others who have believed in this movement and all of us, we've been able to create a structure where actually Karian, who's very close to Betty, and Enlace, has actually taken charge of leading efforts here in the New England region. I recently learned more about the work here in Holyoke and how they want to bring the culture ambassadors program. And so that's definitely something we should work with the student organizations here and work with the faculty and see how we could actually implement this program, because that's the idea, empowering the students and see how we can connect the future with the future present with our current leaders and how we can move forward. I just wanted to add that actually we had a national event recently with Centro in New York City, and we also, part of our big emphasis is bridging that gap between the youth in the island and the youth here in the mainland, and we're actually able to achieve that successfully with great partners of Centro, and recently this summer, and we brought many from New York, Florida, and among many others, Pennsylvania, to actually be there with the youth in Puerto Rico, exchange thoughts, exchange how are we going to work together. So that was two of the big gaps, empowering our youth, getting them engaged in our high-level conversations, and then bridging between Puerto Rico, the work being done with the youth in Puerto Rico and the youth over here. And so, it's been pretty successful. We're proud of it, and we are extremely grateful for all of our partners who have made it possible.
Because as a city councilor, we all know that elections are about votes. And as we know, and it has been stated here several times today, that it's like, voy a votar pa que, why am I going to vote? What am I going to vote for? They're all a bunch of crooks, or, they come in only, they campaign only during the time of elections, and then they don't come back around. So if you could put, if you could answer this, not only in solidarity with Puerto Rico, but also the Puerto Rican community, the diaspora that is here, how is it that you get to motivate and stay connected to them, knowing that they're here part of the time and they're over there part of the time? See?
So, with tremendous respect to the educational community, I'm gonna speak some facts. The truth is that I went to college, but I dropped out. I failed out. I had a lot of help with different things. I couldn't afford a laptop. Small things, right? And not saying that we didn't have support, but I grew up with 9 brothers and sisters. And a lot of you probably shocked, like, oh God, did you see what you got 9 brothers and sisters? We're one of those families that you already know, Titi, and we raised and we adopted. It all just became one happy family. We were like the Boricua, one of those Brady Bunch. Yeah, there you go. So essentially, working with student organizations, which I have a lot of, experience with, is a good component. But the problem is, we're not necessarily canvassing, all right? We have forgotten the one-to-one, the sitting down at a table and drinking cafecito con abuelita, or compartiendo pan, the small things that built this movement, right? And essentially because of the era of technology, we feel that we share, that it's going to get to the masses, which realistically our community, if we're coming from a devastation, no tenemos cell phones, no tenemos internet, there's a language barrier. Like yesterday, just in particular, I was talking to a woman that's well educated in Puerto Rico, came over here, and it was disheartening to hear that the fact is, I can't take the teacher's exam here in Massachusetts because it's not in my language. And she is a very bright person that we need in our schools to be able to work with those same kind of individuals, right? Because when she was talking about, Vanessa, about our stories and our narrative is going to empower, the truths and empower people to be able to move forward. When you go back, and everybody sees me with my hat, and it has La Do Bandera, right? The black and white one and the light blue one. And essentially, the reason why I came and I wore my hat was for the solidarity of, I don't care if you're an Medina, statehood person, this is about Puerto Rico at the end of the day. What we've seen in Old San Juan, where there was almost 1 million Boricuas that came, didn't matter what flag or what they represented outside of that. That one day we seen Puerto Rico, in those couple weeks, right? We seen Puerto Rico as one, and we see the diaspora all over the nation come together and do something very special. And that's how we, as the diaspora, as young people, were able to connect with our brothers and sisters on the island. And there was folks that took the initiative and took that flight and went out there. And there was a couple people from Western Mass that went out there, and it just so happened it happened on some people's vacations. I was like, man, did you guys get a heads up or something? Something was going down. But essentially, you know, there's people, there's kids, right? And there's community that don't get that doorknob. They don't get somebody to come by and check on them. It could be your neighbor, and it starts off on the grassroots level. And I've always said this, it's going outside your house and checking on your neighbor. And consistently doing that, checking on your neighbor, or checking on down the street, and then creating these small coalitions and not hoping to God that somebody else is doing the work, because the work begins with yourself. As no matter where on the spectrum, if you're high level educated, or struggling, or you know somebody, like sometimes when you see somebody just saying hello, como está, or hit them, I'm always the freak of nature. I'm always trying to be high intense, right? But essentially, those are the things that you want people to really recognize. Like going down in the parade this past, I was, and I'm gonna leave it at this. I was driving down in my go-kart and I was giving out Puerto Rican flags, and I seen two individuals that reminded me of my grandmother and my grandfather, and there was something missing. So I turned around, and I was on the corner of Jefferson. I took out 2 flags, and everybody was like, "No, I'm dead." I said, "You guys gotta wait." I took it straight to those 2 individuals. They had to be like 70 or 80 years old, and I don't even know if they ever even owned or they had a flag. And that's where it starts, because that's how these Puerto Rican parades and stuff like that, solidarity started, was because they didn't let us wave our flag. And I felt these 2 individuals need to wave our flag. They need to feel connected. And if those small instances, if it's checking on your abuelita or your cousin or your neighbor, and creating these coalitions, and we have allies as well, right? You know, and we can't think that people can't be a part of this movement as well. So outside of that, it just starts within yourself first. Organize your family, your kids, then organize your primos. And if they're not listening, then organize people at work. These are different places that we have to be unapologetic, because you know what? Those other communities, that's what they do. Oh, I don't want to look crazy. I don't know, Adam, yo no sé. Bendito, I'm going to look, this is not the appropriate, when is the appropriate time to organize and be about Puerto Rico?
Yeah.
And that's what it is. If you're at work and there's only 2 Puerto Ricans, you know what, I'm sitting with you at lunch every day, we're going to talk about Puerto Rican stuff. And if you're not Puerto Rican, I'm going to teach you something today.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you. Vanessa, I'm going to ask you something a little bit different, and then, gentlemen, please feel free. How can we get Latinos to have and get greater voting power when a lot of Latinos in Western Mass don't care about civic engagement? That's the question. What is your opinion or your response to this question?
Well, I think first of all, I think there is some assumption in that question about Latinos, Puerto Ricans not being part of or engaged civic engagement, right? And I think part of that comes with awareness. I think part of that is how we ask for their input. And in some cases, when we ask the Puerto Rican community, it comes across offensive. And I think it's the way we approach. We have to be intentional to ask, and we have to make sure that it's beneficial. And so I think, again, to the point of narratives, if we don't know the story, the history the background, the roots, the why individuals are not participating specifically around voting, then what are we doing to be more informed? We actually had a similar conversation during lunch today. So is it a Handa that we have to organize and march down the streets? I don't know. But I think when we leave that, the Puerto Rican community specifically out of the conversation and we only speak about them as an other, or when we only speak about the Puerto Rican community as if it's another country, then I think that's where the disconnect is. And I think that there hasn't been really a huge emphasis on the importance of how they can influence by voting the local elections. And I think there's a lot of intention around presidential elections, and you can see the difference in numbers of people come out to vote. But I don't think there has been a lot of emphasis in the local narrative on the importance of how to influence. So I encourage the political folks in the room to make sure that when you're having the platform to share why they should vote for you, I think you also need to remind them the benefits of what happens in communities.
I'm not going to let you answer that.
I think it's important. All right, I'm sorry.
You got 1 minute.
1 minute.
The fact of the matter is that the Democratic or Republican Party, depending on what their interests are, don't spend money during certain elections in our communities. And that's a fact. I'm just gonna leave it like that. And outside of that, if you're in a community that they're telling you to wait or wait your turn, if they don't have a really good reason of why, and essentially if they're saying that they're gonna groom you, you can vote next time, just run like hell. Because at the end of the day, we got the numbers. And if we don't take risks, that's why people are gonna say, why am I gonna go vote? Because I'm gonna go vote for Fulano again. But Fulano's me though. I'm Ana Gomez, or if it's Gladys Franco or Betty Lichtenstein, you know, they'll vote for you. But essentially when people don't really, when their vote, when they cast it, isn't reflective of what they see in the mirror, that's when they said, you know what, I'd rather sit this one out. And that's it. Is that 1 minute?
So, I've been given time, because he's the timekeeper. Edwin, I know the feeling wherever Edwin is. Yep. Carlos is the one that rules, I know. That's an uncomfortable feeling. So now I appreciate that. So here's a question, right? And thank you, all of you who have submitted your questions, but there's also some breakout sessions that we need to get to. So I'd like to close with this one, and I'd like to pass this mic share with you, because it actually impacts all of the work that all three of you are doing. And the question is, how can we create a national movement? How can we empower our diaspora communities to influence U.S. Congress to resolve, improve the economic and political reality of Puerto Rico and its residents? Let's start right here.
So this is a perfect question. Actually, so I want to answer it with a very inspirational story. In Florida particularly, we're actually growing our community faster than what we are actually growing capacity, particularly institutional capacity of dealing with issues such as access to education, housing, healthcare, income, equality, all those type of basic issues. And so right now we're actually having, she's an example of how a person from this PRSA background, person who actually at the University of Florida International University in Miami, she actually took the initiative while doing her master's to start the PRSA over there, and now she's actually running for the Florida House. So that's how significant this type of work is, because the type of connections that are done, the type of knowledge, access to different opportunities, this is the type of inspiration it brings. And so she is actually key for our capacity building, particularly in South Florida. And if we're going to go to lobby in Congress, if it's at the local, we have to lobby at the local, state, and federal level. As well as people who understand the politics in Puerto Rico and who can actually go and tackle issues over there as well. And so we need our elected officials who understand, who have built capacity with us, and understand what's going on. So here, our council friend here, who has been an example of that, you know, we're hoping that people such as Gabriela Jesus, who's running for the Florida House, can actually follow that lead and collaborate with people such as elected officials here in the state of Massachusetts, New York, and Pennsylvania, and many others. And you know, we're seeing this change within the youth, and we definitely want to embrace and empower, and you know, we're all Jimmy and everyone is going on her back and pushing her forward. So hopefully, you know, that's a big win, and we keep pushing forward, making a difference.
Jose Luis for Congress.
No, I just believe that sometimes locally, we don't get involved with, I'm going to say straight up, like C4s, right? 501c4s, you'll be able to endorse candidates, right? And there's not, from what I understand, there's not a lot of Latino endorsed or Latino PACs. There is some, but there's not one that kind of comes down to one national PAC, you know, that I don't know of. If I'm speaking out of the side of my neck, please pull me aside and help me, because I would love to know that. But essentially here in your local areas, sometimes it's like there's this one gatekeeper or there's one gatekeeper that's just the guy that you need to go to. And we need to get away from that narrative of this is the guy, this is the only guy you can talk to. And then essentially that's going to be the mouthpiece to the community. And he's the only guy that got the money, which the young people we have seen in the Progressive Party is, even if it's dollar by dollar or $5 at a time, we create these PACs where we are able to open up and become our own C4s and endorse folks that are speaking our narrative and are speaking our truths and are speaking the way we want and fighting for those differences that we want, those changes. So that's just on a local level. But aside from that, there's just start getting involved with different organizations that you meet, like at events like this. Take the initiative to maybe put $40 in the tank and go to New York, or put 100 in the tank and get to DC. Because sometimes you never know who you're going to meet, and essentially who's sitting next to you and what you guys can build from it. Because this is not a me game, it's a we game. And if we don't get that clear first and foremost, then we're all going to lose. And in the end, inevitably. But
So I think that a part of it, again, my experience is that, you know, there might be two people of color in my organization that are really advocating for the work. But that doesn't mean that the other people that you work with can't be allies. And I think sometimes we kind of create our own, we create the conflict. And we sometimes go into, many of us, I think, when you get a little older, and I kind of understand better now, when you're younger, you don't have as many scars. And you're okay to fall. And when you get older, you're scared of heights. And you don't want to deal with certain peoples because of how they've treated you. And I think that's just a reality. I feel like I'm still in a neutral space where that I can still work with everyone and anyone, and I hope that I don't grow older and get someone. It's just from my experience that people just won't work with each other. And so I think what I recognize, or what I'm challenged with, is sometimes the fear of the unknown and the fear of, we work together, would this actually work? And I think we need to get out of our comfort zones and utilize the spaces that we're in our positions, to strategize and create those opportunities, create those pathways, create those pipelines. Because in order for us to dismantle the dysfunctions that happen in a lot of our communities and a lot of our organizations, I think we have to be really strategic of how we partner and what is the intention of what we're doing. And it is an example for us in our organization to create opportunities for the next generation of storytellers, media makers, journalists. Then what are we doing, and who do we need to bring around the table to do that because I can't do it by myself. But we know that there's an issue of when we talk about education, and we know that there's a gap around even employment. And so how do we create those pools of employable bilingual talent that already exists?
I was in New York and we were at the summit. And I was moderating a panel on what has happened post-Maria, right? What was it that local communities were able to do? And so I was very honored to have members from New York City, from New Jersey, and from Philadelphia. And something that struck me, I kind of got frozen in my chair while they were speaking about the kind of efforts that each community had done with or without government assistance. What struck me was that in all three of those states, there is reciprocity. That there is reciprocity for all of those that came from Puerto Rico, the teachers, the doctors, the multiple technicians, all of these amazing talents. Those communities said, you're home. We're going to keep you here. Here in Massachusetts, and I wish Maria Idalí Torres was here, she would say to you, and probably if Melissa's still in the room, they would say to you that this is over a 30-year fight in this state. How come is it that we don't come together, and there's so many educators here and leaders, how come is it that in Massachusetts this is still an ongoing issue? And unless we come together, unless we show the numbers, and Edwin, I'm listening when you keep on telling us it's not about how many of us are here and how many of us are over there, el aquí y allá, we're 9 million strong. And that has to make a damn difference when it comes to voting. And it has to be able to not only happen in our local municipalities, but it has to also happen at the federal level, at the national level. We have to leave our footprint. We must. It is the time. There's 3 things that come to mind. One of them is, it's the census. This is a time that every single person must be counted. Whether you're homeless, whether you're over your home, whether you're in a tenement, whether you're in a dorm, you have to be able to be counted, all right? If we miss this opportunity, it is going to show the government that we are non-existent, and they will continue to kick us to the side. The other thing is that there's voting happening all over the place in different communities and different states, and then also we have 2020. And that for us will be enormous. Jose Luis keeps on referring to Jimmy because he's kind of our Boricua Vota. I still got the flag in my office, and it just came out recently in a picture. If we continue to let ourselves be blinded by corruption, or that we do not count, that our vote doesn't count, we will continue to see year in and year out the kind of data that we saw today. Some of it doesn't belong to us. We did not create the hurricanes, but we are responsible for climate change. And so that's the third issue that's really important to us. It is not affecting us, it's affecting this whole world. So I want to say it is for us to take action as individuals. We also, Adam, I applaud you. I was pretty pissed that you didn't come with me to New York, but then when I saw pictures, you had to see the pictures of Adam speaking to all of these Congress people. It was like, oh, I should have gone with Adam, but no. I was with you.
I was going to stop, I promise.
Yeah, no, it is, and to see, and I really appreciated Vanessa speaking about Adam being one of her students. This is the population that is making the difference, that they have no fear. That, sometimes, I'll be 67 tomorrow, and I have a lot of scars, and I think about, do I really want to do that? And so we all have an obligation and a responsibility. If not, when probably I won't be here, but 30 years from now, the conversation will be the same, if not worse. And as someone recently who's sitting right in front of me, one of my board members, reported the other day at our board meeting, if we do not change the narrative. Puerto Rico in 10 years is not going to be the Puerto Rico that we know, that we love, that our ancestors fought and died for. It's up to us. And yes, allies are important. We cannot do this alone. We have our friends, our neighbors that support us and that are with us in this struggle. So with that, I want to ask for an applause and a thank you of our